Hello and welcome to the OutBack Power SkyBox Introduction webinar. This is the first of 4 webinars scheduled between now and the end of November to talk about SkyBox. So in this webinar, we will go through a brief introduction to the SkyBox True Hybrid Energy System. We have the opportunity for you to type any of your questions into the question box. And we may have more questions than we have time to be able to address today. If that turns out to be the case, we will follow up with you and send answers to any and all of your specific questions. We'll also send out a copy of this recording for anyone interested in that. So thank you for attending. My name is Bo Maglulian. I am the Senior Product Manager in charge of SkyBox. And with that, let's get going. So in this webinar, we'll talk about SkyBox and we'll do a brief introduction and talk about some of these battery options that are available to you with SkyBox. SkyBox is a true hybrid energy management system. It provides 5 kW of power in any and all directions. This platform gives us the option of supporting other markets in the future down the road, but at the moment, the version that we have released right now supports only the North America market. It is 120 to 40 volt split phase and 60 hertz. SkyBox's values are being resilient, adaptable, simple, and intelligent. And what does that mean for us? That means providing immediate backup power. It means supporting generators. And it means providing a durable product which results in fewer service calls, the ability to do remote support in the event that service is required. And by adaptable, we mean that it's NEMA 3R. So it's a drop-in replacement for any existing grid-dependent string inverter. Works with the widest variety of 48 volt battery chemistries, all of your traditional lead acid batteries, as well as many advanced lithium ion battery chemistries. And it's stackable. That's going to be enabled via software down the road in the future. SkyBox is a simple design. It's easy and fast to install. And it's a clean BOS or balance of systems. That's a load center that is underneath SkyBox. It ships with the SkyBox. It's all in one box. And SkyBox supports PV voltage ranges as low as 250 volts and as high as 600 volts. So very wide voltage input range, so that you can set your string sizing for whatever is appropriate for your particular situation. And then finally, SkyBox provides dynamic power management, the ability to support, to measure power at all of its 5 ports. And then we also have the ability to support new regulatory needs via firmware downloads. So anytime the grid regulations change or there's a new change in the utility rates, we can support those via firmware updates. Physically, SkyBox is a 5-port design. The system is controllable at each connection point, and the grid, load, and battery ports are all bidirectional, allowing for adjustable export or import at each of those locations. And you'll notice that on this particular screen, I'm showing the loads only going in one direction to the home. But we'll be able to support AC coupling via frequency shift in the future via firmware. So you'd put a grid-dependent string inverter or other inverter on the SkyBox's load port, and then SkyBox could do the would support AC coupling there. So again, core values. SkyBox enables you to take charge of your energy. It's designed to be simple, smart, cost-effective, renewable energy system. It's optimized for mainstream, grid-tied worldwide market. We think that if you can install a grid-dependent string inverter, you can install a SkyBox. Residential energy storage system, providing backup power and self-consumption, either on or off grid. It can be used with or without energy storage, so batteries are completely optional. It's comparable in terms of ease of installation, operation efficiency, and reliability to your simple grid-tied inverters. And it's a smart inverter able to measure and control power from all of its connection points. So why solar plus storage? What are the market drivers for storage and adding storage to a solar installation? Well, there are the financially driven use cases, having the easiest storage solution available to install and enabling PV self-consumption, and then finally providing time of use energy optimization. There are the functionally driven use cases, providing backup or resiliency, and then providing a future-proofed PV system that's able to adapt and respond to new changes in grid interconnection profiles or other regulatory changes. And then finally, not to discount them, they're the emotionally driven use cases, the people who don't want to leave their home or their pets in the dark when there's an outage so that they can go to a hotel and stay warm. They're the people who don't want to have to replace all of the food in their refrigerator or the freezer out in the garage. And finally, they're the people who have, for one reason or another, decided that they want to cut the cord or try to cut the cord with their utility company. Again, there's nothing to discount or to diminish those emotionally driven use cases. They're just as valid as the financial and the functionally driven use cases. And the SkyBox supports all of those use cases. And you can see that from the pictures here up above. These are actual screenshots from a SkyBox system. And what we're seeing here with this particular SkyBox is 5 kW PV production during the day, peaking at noontime. And that doesn't match up with the household load, which is presented on the right-hand side. So how is it that this particular SkyBox is able to do 100% self-consumption? Well, it's doing that by charging the battery while it's simultaneously powering loads during the day and then discharging that battery in the evening when the sun's gone down. So SkyBox allows you to automate your savings. We make it easy for you. You just enter the data and SkyBox maximizes your return on investment. When there is insufficient PV to power loads in the house, SkyBox determines the lowest cost of energy source and then uses it. So if, for example, the battery is less expensive than your current grid rate, then SkyBox will use the battery. And conversely, if your utility rates are less expensive than your battery replacement cost, then SkyBox will use the grid. And then finally, you can set whatever battery reserve level for backup power. So as the installer, there are 4 things that you would need to enter when doing the battery configuration. Your customer's rate schedule, whether or not it's allowable to export power back to the grid at that particular location. The third thing would be your battery replacement cost. So that's you as the installer, what it would cost you to, at the end of the battery's lifetime, roll back and replace that battery. And then finally, the fourth thing is how much of the battery the homeowner wants to leave as a reserve percentage in case of outage. With respect to specifications, SkyBox has continuous power rating of 5 kW in any direction. It's 120/240. Maximum AC power input is up to 60 amps AC pass-through from the grid. So if you have a high surge load and your grid connected, your excess surge capacity then is met by the grid. SkyBox will support 5 kW for that load. MPPT voltage window, down as low as 250, up as high as 600. Battery voltage window is consistent with your traditional 48 volt batteries. So it's 42 volts, up as high as 60. Operating temperature range, -20 up to 60 degrees C. And then CEC weighted efficiency across the entire PV voltage window range, 94%. Excellent total harmonic distortion, field upgradable firmware, non-volatile memory. So all of the data that you've seen on the previous screens for SkyBox is all saved locally, as well as sent up to the cloud to OpticsRE so that the homeowner can view that from anywhere. And then from an environmental point of view, it's an NEMA 3R, so you can install that outside of the garage. Okay, so with respect to value proposition and positioning this for your customers, right? We talked about the financially driven use cases, the functionally driven use cases, and the emotionally driven use cases. And we think we've got the right feature set with SkyBox to support all of those fully, right? It's a truly multi-mode inverter. It can be installed with or without batteries. You can add batteries later, or you can always install with one chemistry today and then change your mind if you have if a different battery chemistry is more appropriate for a new use case in that particular facility. SkyBox provides immediate backup power, so no need to reset digital clocks or your microwave or your router or anything else like that. It's full 5 kW in any operating mode, and it's off-grid compatible, so generator friendly, grid forming. And then finally, it's compatible with low-cost batteries and available batteries. So that's all of your 48-volt vented lead-acid batteries, as well as lithium-ion batteries. Battery options for SkyBox. And in this particular transition slide, I inserted a picture from one of our installs in California. And on the left-hand side of the picture, there's a lot of other OutBack products, but in the center there, you see a OutBack IBR3 with 6 Simplify batteries in it. And then this particular install decided they wanted to add the custom lighting on their own. And on the right, they've got their SkyBox installed. Okay, so SkyBox batteries. We support low-cost lead-acid batteries or any of your advanced chemistries as well. And the best battery for you and your application may not be the same for everybody else. So an example of that, you could pair SkyBox with Simplify, for example, in a variety of applications. The best one might be off-grid or unreliable grid situations, but you could use it in a variety of places. For time of use applications, the best battery for you might be a battery like the 48-volt LG Chem, or for self-consumption, it might be the nanocarbon battery or the PLR battery, for backup flow type applications. SkyBox is not going to dictate which battery chemistry is right for your applications. Please pick the best battery that is best for you. Okay, so to summarize, SkyBox allows you to take charge of your energy. PV and battery backup are delivered seamlessly from an all-in-one, one-box solution. It complies with all grid interconnection limitations, so California Rule 21, HECO 14H, IEEE 1547, everything like that. Supports time of use, so you can use your battery and your PV when electricity is expensive. It's DC coupled for highest efficiency. We support the industry-leading solar plus storage website OpticsRE, so you can do all of your remote monitoring and updates via OpticsRE, and it's compatible with the widest range of battery chemistries, from LG Chem Resu 48-volt and of course all OutBack lead-acid batteries. Okay. Up next, on November 1st, we'll talk about SkyBox applications and target uses. That's at the same time, same day of the week. We'll do SkyBox installation on November 8th, and we'll do SkyBox software overview on November 29th. You can go to outbackpower.com/resources/OBT training/webinars to register. And you can visit outbackpower.com/training for a full class schedule and register for energy storage and the solar professionals. That's the 4-day deep dive class into how to install solar storage, how to install PV storage or battery storage. And it's a 4-day class that covers all of our OutBack products, including 1 day dedicated for SkyBox. With that, I'd like to say thank you for your time, and we've got a ton of questions and more questions coming in. So we will, again, do our best to answer all of those today. If I can't or don't have the time to answer all of the questions, we will definitely follow up with you with answers to specific questions, and then we can also get a copy of this recording for your records. Oops. Okay, questions. Farrell asked, can the SkyBox AC couple, and if so, can it frequency shift? So yes, it will be able to. We are not supporting AC coupling in the firmware today. Our focus right now is to get the product out to market and then to get stacking out first. We do quarterly firmware updates, and we'll support AC coupling on SkyBox in a subsequent quarterly firmware update down the road. Farrell also asked if the SkyBox can work with optimizers. Probably best to answer that question by going into a specific example. With the Tigo optimizer today, we have seen some nuisance arc fault trips, and it doesn't seem to work with the optimizer function as it stands today. And we can have a discussion with Tigo about whether or not that's an issue on their firmware or on ours. But at the moment, no, it doesn't work with that particular optimizer, and it may well work with others though. So I know we'd like to make it work with that optimizer, and I believe Tigo is in the same position, would like to make their optimizer work with SkyBox. How many strings of PV? 2 strings, single MPPT. So you would not want to have different string sizes. Joshua asked that question. Jimmy asked if the SkyBox can be set up as a grid tie inverter with or without batteries for 0 export. Yes, absolutely. Batteries are optional, and you can set up SkyBox as a grid tie inverter and configure it for 0 export. SkyBox will modulate its PV production to match loads. And then you can always choose to add batteries later if you like. Jeff asked how many SkyBoxes can be stacked. We've done all of the hardware testing, Jeff, to verify that up to 10 SkyBoxes can be stacked together. And then the reason why we aren't supporting it yet in firmware is we want to make sure that the software installation process is smooth and seamless, that the experience matches what you'd expect from our product. And so we're holding off on that software to support stacking until we can get the installation up to our standards. So Kuno asked about equalization charge voltage on flooded lead acid batteries. We cannot do that. We're not supporting them. Not for equalization charge. Maximum voltage that SkyBox can do out to the batteries is 60 volts. So it'll work with the batteries up until 60 volts, but it won't be able to provide that higher voltage equalization charge. Mark asked if the SkyBox will be able to support higher voltage battery banks in the future. It's something we can put on the roadmap. It's something we've talked about, and in terms of development, something we looked at briefly. We wanted to make sure that we worked with 48 volt batteries first and foremost. to provide you, the installer, with the most flexibility and the most options out there. And so that's why we have released SkyBox right now, this particular version of it, with support for 48-volt battery. One other important follow-on point to that, you may or may not have noticed in the slides, LG Chem does make a 48-volt pack as well. And we have done all of the communications, testing, and integration work to verify that we work with that active BMS. DC asked if SkyBox will produce PV direct without batteries. I think I touched on that one already, but yes, absolutely. You can, as Jimmy asked, connect SkyBox directly as a grid tie inverter without batteries and then do whatever you'd like and add batteries later. Jerry asked if charge parameters are pre-programmed for battery chemistry or manufacturer model. Yes. Today, SkyBox's charge parameters and discharge parameters are pre-programmed for LG Chem and for all OutBack power batteries. We are also adding the pre-programmed parameters for Simplify, and then we are happy to work with a variety of other battery manufacturers to investigate the feasibility of adding their battery parameters into SkyBox on a pre-programmed basis as well. We also support custom batteries, so you could make your own battery configuration and input your own parameters. Rob asked if multiple SkyBoxes can be paralleled to achieve, say, 120 amps of AC output to loads. Yes, absolutely, Rob. When we support stacking, the output to loads will all be paralleled, as well as, of course, all of the grid connections. So it'd be parallel on either side of SkyBox, if you want to think about it that way. Tom asked about surge capability. Tom, I'm not putting surge capability on the spec sheet for SkyBox. SkyBox is not really designed to be an off-grid high surge inverter. We happen to make the Radian inverter, which is fabulous for that application. And if you need to be off-grid and you need to support surge loads for a short period of time, Radian is your best choice. If you're grid tied, SkyBox can pull the excess power to support those surge loads from the grid. Chris, you asked about AC coupling. I think we addressed that one already. I'm just sort of going through these in order they were submitted. Joy asked about SGIP application. I believe we have everything put together, Joy, but I need to dig into that in a little bit more detail, and I will follow up with you on that. Will asked about backup features. Those happen via critical or a sub load panel. Yes. So your alarm clock, microwave, etc., would need to be on the critical panel. Yes, you would want to put all of your critical backup loads on that panel, on the load port. Matt asked about rapid shutdown solutions. Matt, that's an excellent question. SkyBox is transformerless, so you need to disconnect both positive and negative PV, which is another way of saying that SkyBox won't work with the existing FlexWare ICS Plus. But SkyBox has built-in arc fault, as well as ground fault and impedance fault checks. So SkyBox doesn't need all of the functionality that's in the FlexWare ICS Plus. We've produced a SkyBox rapid shutdown variant of the ICS product that is a fair bit cheaper than the ICS Plus. Jeffrey asked about stacking 2, 3, or 4 SkyBoxes. Jeffrey, I think we've addressed that question. Is yes, we will be able to support stacking SkyBoxes. Mark is asking a question that I think we've also addressed already, in that SkyBox can operate strictly as a grid-tied inverter with no batteries installed. It absolutely functions that way. I've got one on the wall a few feet from me that's actually doing that right now because it happens to be the test we're performing with it. Jeffrey asked where SkyBox is manufactured. Right here in the US of A, Jeffrey, in the state of Washington, of components sourced both domestically and from a variety of international sources. We bought components where it was the most effective to do so and where we had a supply chain that could actually produce them in the volume we needed to buy them at. Joshua asked, what option are you using to achieve module level rapid shutdown with this system? Joshua, what we're doing on module level rapid shutdown is we are working with a variety of third-party suppliers to qualify, to verify that their rapid shutdown solution works with SkyBox. For example, I mentioned Tygo earlier. They have an excellent rapid shutdown product that they have proven compliance on, works with some of our other OutBack products. They started with the FM80 and ICS Plus. It's the same technology as what's in SkyBox, so we'll go through that certification and compliance process with them with SkyBox as well. We're confident it's going to pass, and we're expecting to get them a SkyBox to test here soon. Joshua asked if SkyBox is compatible with Discovery battery 48-volt lithium-ion batteries. So Joshua, I've heard a couple different things about Discover, and I've had a couple of excellent conversations with the team there. I have heard that Discover works and functions, behaves as though it is a lead-acid battery. In that case, SkyBox absolutely supports them. I also have been told and have had the discussion that Discover has an active BMS. And as I kind of touched on earlier, we will happily work with and integrate with battery manufacturers who have an active BMS and make sure that the communications protocol work and that the battery manufacturer gets all of the support from the inverter that they need. Oscar asked if it's necessary to have the Mate 3. Oscar, it is not. As much as I love the Mate 3, it is no longer required for SkyBox. SkyBox has everything all in one box, and all of the communications and setup and display of information is all controlled right there at the user interface on SkyBox. Mark asked if SkyBox is available now. Yes, Mark, it is. Contact your distributor and make sure you get an order in. And ballpark cost, I can touch on MSRP. MSRP for SkyBox is $86.30. Of course, your cost from distributor is probably a lot less than that, but that's the MSRP. Bill asked when firmware will be available for stacking SkyBoxes. And Bill, I picked this question out to address it specifically. Stacking is my #1 priority. Supporting stacking is the most important thing that our engineering team is working on with respect to SkyBox right now. And we do quarterly firmware updates. So there is an update scheduled for December. It may or may not be in that update. If it's not, then it will be in the next one, I would assume, or some subsequent quarter after that. But I can state with clarity that it is our #1 priority. Cesar asked if SkyBox is available for 3-phase systems. Not at this time, Cesar, but please do reach out to me. I will reach out to you as well because we want to understand what your requirements are and what you need to do with respect to 3-phase systems and energy storage. We've got a variety of solutions that we could provide for you there. Andy asked a tough question about with regard to optimizers and shading. Is there anything we can do to fight shading there? Andy, unfortunately, your best option for a very shaded install is to do something like a microinverter and AC couple that into SkyBox. Yeah, that's probably your best way to approach that. Okay. DC asked a very detailed question about, will SkyBox work with the SunSpec standard? Yes. SkyBox is fully SunSpec compliant and will also support 2030.5 here in February of 2019. Ian, you asked about time of use and what the best batteries are to use for that. All of them, frankly, whichever battery you want to use for time of use and for your other applications at that particular home, pick the best battery that's right for you. I selected 4 batteries as examples and as examples only. So we are not going to dictate or force you to use one battery versus another. We want you to pick the right battery that's right for your application and right for your customer. Joshua asked if SkyBox can power a critical load panel when the grid is down, even if you haven't yet added batteries. If the sun is out and you have an outage, yes, absolutely. SkyBox will do its best to maintain all the loads on the critical load panel. Now, the stark reality of that is that you're then in a race condition between the loads and the maximum power point tracker. The battery serves as a buffer there. And without a battery, you have to modulate the power output from the PV to exactly match loads. If your loads start turning off, start turning on again rapidly, you may encounter a situation where SkyBox drops those loads and shuts itself off, and then it's not going to come back on again until it gets either 48 volt DC battery power or 240 volt AC power from the grid. Dean asked about actual dimensions of the SkyBox. Dean, I'm going to hold that off for a few weeks and defer to the spec sheet because, as embarrassed as I am about it, I don't have all of them memorized. I know that SkyBox on the wall is 47 inches tall, 30 inches wide, and 9.25 inches deep with the installation bracket that ships on the back of SkyBox. I know that SkyBox ships all in one box and its shipping weight is 138 pounds, that it is approximately 27 inches tall in that shipping box and 24, 25 inches wide and about 20 inches deep. But I'm going shipping dimension boxes from memory, and I may or may not be accurate on that. So we'll follow up with you on that, and we'll cover that in the webinar in 2 weeks. Dale asked if SkyBox will work on a residence which has air conditioning that are more than 5 kW as a major load. Will it require stacking? Yes, Dale, it will in order to run that large air conditioning unit in an outage. Mike, you asked about AC coupling down the road. Same answer with respect to scheduling as I gave on stacking, except that AC coupling is my second priority after stacking. We do quarterly firmware updates, and AC coupling will be in a firmware update probably after we do stacking. Bill asked if SkyBox is available in system edge packages. Yes, Bill, it absolutely is. There are 4 system edge packages available for sale right now with SkyBox. Those are with the Energy Cell NC nanocarbon batteries, the Energy Cell PLR pure lead battery, and with Simplify in both a IBR2 or a 14 kWh pack, or an IBR3, which is a 21 kWh pack. And then we've done all of the communications work to be able to offer the system edge package with the LG Chem Resu 48 volt, and we're looking forward to getting those into the market here soon. Jeffrey asked about the SkyBox SOC reading and whether or not it's accurate with the Simplify battery. It seems to be. All of our testing done prior to launch indicated that it is and was. And one of the discussions that I have had with the Simplify team is if they would like me to change the algorithm that we use to calculate SOC for their particular battery chemistry. We're happy to go down that route and to have that discussion with them. Scott asked about Rely-On batteries, and we work with Rely-On batteries. They behave as though they are a lead acid battery chemistry, and we have done installs with Rely-On batteries. Katie asked about 5 kW in either direction. Does that include charging capacity? Yes, Katie, it absolutely does. So that's 5 kW charging, 5 kW discharging, 5 kW off of the PV. And then AC is limited by 240 volt, 60 amp. Richard is asking a detailed question about AC coupling and whether or not the size of the grid-dependent inverter, which is AC coupled to SkyBox, matters with respect to SkyBox, and it does not. It's a 240 volt 60 amp breaker there, so that'd be the only limitation of about, what is that, 14.2 or whatever kW. But SkyBox doesn't care if that grid dependent inverter that's an AC power source is next door on the roof or a mile down the road or at a substation. It's an AC power source, and SkyBox will treat it exactly the same regardless of where it is or what size it is. Jimmy asked if we can source batteries from others, or do they need to be provided by OutBack? Obviously, I'm going to prefer OutBack batteries, but SkyBox is battery agnostic. We've done extensive testing with Simplify, and we love the Simplify battery, but we want to make sure that you have the right battery for your particular application. And as long as it behaves as though it's a lead acid battery, it will work with SkyBox. Glenn asked if we can add Discover battery parameters. Yes, we absolutely can. We've had discussions with them, and we're working that out with them. Look forward to that in a firmware update in the future. Mark asked if SkyBox is stackable for 3-phase. Theoretically, yes. We have not done that yet, and it's something that we can look at on the roadmap, Mark. I want to talk with you about your specific needs and requirements there. Alex asked if this session will be available later. Yes, Alex, it absolutely will. We are recording this, and we will email a link out to you here soon so you can access a copy of the recording. Rob asked if the SkyBox is Wi-Fi ready, and Rob, it is not. We have an Ethernet port, Cat5, RJ45 connection, and that's it. We can look at adding additional Wi-Fi or CDMA or cell phone connections in the future as a roadmap item, but right now we have an Ethernet port, and you're welcome to connect anything you like on after that. Andy asked about load shedding, anything that we can do with demand management outside of batteries. Andy, that's a great question. One of the other software features that we're holding back a little bit longer until we can get the implementation exactly right and exactly the way we want it to do is load management for increasing days of autonomy. So for example, we can drop 240 volt loads in case of a grid outage or at low battery SOC. And that's coming in a firmware release after AC coupling and after stacking. Michael asked about PV input limits. Minimum voltage 250 volts, maximum 600 volts. So you probably have strings on the roof that could just be moved over to SkyBox. Its operating current is at 20 amps and 32 amps short circuit. So you're looking at 2 strings that would be same length, and then single MPPT on those 2 strings. Mike asked about warranty period. 5-year warranty standard. Nick, will SkyBox be serviceable through authorized service centers? We have an authorized service center in Phoenix. Phoenix will be shipping out our advanced replacement SkyBox units in the event, if anything should happen and a SkyBox needs to be replaced out in the field. We would issue a RMA and charge a credit card for the replacement unit, which would then be sent to the facility, and you would take the existing failed, if one should fail, inverter off the wall, put that in the box to us. SkyBox is not designed for service out in the field or at any other remote service centers at this time. Chris asked about price point of SkyBox with respect to FPR Radian, for example, 4 versus 8 kW. So the SkyBox is a little bit more expensive than the Radian 4 kW and a little bit less expensive than the Radian 8 kW. Terry asked me to clarify the situation with Tigo. The Tigo optimizers cause an arc fault, a nuisance arc fault to be reported in SkyBox and causes PV to shut down. That was as of a few months ago. I don't know if subsequent changes in Tigo firmware have fixed that issue or not. But what we do know for sure is that the Tigo rapid shutdown units absolutely work with OutBack power products. They have released documentation certifying that compliance and that interactivity. And the architecture for SkyBox with respect to PV input and arc fault detection is the same as the OutBack product that Tigo certified already. So we're confident that's going to work, or that does work today, and we just need to get Tygo a SkyBox to verify that and to prove that. Glenn asked about stacking and when SkyBox units are stacked, if those are going to go to a common battery bank. They will not go to a common battery bank. Each SkyBox doesn't need its own battery bank, but you would connect a battery bank into a SkyBox. And then when stacked, the SkyBoxes treat themselves as a monolithic 10 kW, 15 kW, 20, 50 kW, whatever the stacked size is, inverter with a, by default, monolithic battery bank. So with an external CT attached, the SkyBoxes can send AC power from one SkyBox to another and use that to charge batteries in the battery bank that is, from a software point of view, shared across all of the SkyBoxes, even though it's physically not shared. Catherine asked about software firmware updates being pushed from corporate. That is absolutely the case. We push the firmware updates. The user then is required to accept the new firmware and install it or download it if they want to have, if you, the installer, wants to configure it that way. The homeowner has the power to decide when is appropriate for them to accept and install the firmware update. John is asking a question about southern Arizona and temperature being very high. Does that then favor the PLC battery? John, I am not a battery expert. I am a SkyBox expert, and I'm not going to attempt to answer the battery part of the question, but I do want to say one thing for you about SkyBox in Tucson or Phoenix, for example. SkyBox produces a full 5 kW at 45 degrees C. Glenn asked about what happens during an outage without a battery attached. And Glenn, you've answered your own question in your text here. So let's, for the benefit of everybody else, let me see if I can summarize and unpack and digest the question. So imagine the following situation. You have a SkyBox and you haven't installed the battery yet. You have a grid outage during the day. SkyBox will produce 5 kW, assuming that the PV array can handle that, to match loads, and it will do that to the best of its ability to match loads for the duration of the sun being out. At nighttime, SkyBox will not wake up the next day. In order to reactivate or to reclose the PV array, it must have a 48-volt DC power supply or split phase 12240 grid power attached to it. Bill asked about surge loads. In an outage, if you see motor surges that exceed 5 kW, SkyBox will attempt to meet all of those loads. It may produce a little bit more than 5 kW for a few seconds, and then you would see the voltage drops. You'd get a brownout type situation, and then you may fault, and SkyBox may need to be reset. In that case, it would do its best to carry on and come back on its own, but you might need to intervene. Andy asked about backup generators. We actually prefer, Andy, to have a 10 kVA battery, a generator, excuse me, connected to a 5 kW SkyBox. And in case of an outage, you can always have any surge for your household loads handled by the generator. On the AC side, the limit on that is simply the breakers in SkyBox, and that's a 60 amp breaker there. Terry asked if we get a wiring diagram for the BOSS box with all breaker sizes shown. I know there's a wiring diagram for the BOSS. That's in the quick start guide. I don't remember for sure if the breaker sizes are labeled on that or not. I will have to check, Terry, and get back to you on that. The simple rule of thumb is that it's a 125 amp breaker on the battery, and it's 60 amps on all of 3 ACs. And then the PV switch, I guess, would be a little different. So let me look into that and I'll get back to you. Travis asked about generator connecting to SkyBox. Yes, absolutely. SkyBox provides automatic transfer, auto start on either dry contact or 12 volt, your choice. And then Brian asked a similar question about aux outputs. So yes, we have aux outputs for auto gen start. Now, Brian, then you followed up your question by asking a very Radiant specific question, which is about using aux outputs for load shedding. And SkyBox is not supporting load shed via aux because we have independent control on the load port, and we can do independent line or leg control. With SkyBox, we're handling that via software rather than via aux. Richard asked about the IBR3 with the 6 Simplify batteries. The cabling is going to be a little bit different. Richard, the IBR3 with or 2 with Simplify that OutBack is selling will have different cabling that is specific to Simplify. So there'll be 2 versions of the IBR2 and 2 versions of the IBR3. Alex asked if SkyBox is currently available internationally, South Africa, for example. And Alex, it is not currently available internationally. We are focused exclusively on North America at the moment. But supporting you in South Africa, for example, is absolutely something we want to do in the future. So we need to talk about that when the timing is appropriate. Rob asked if firmware updates can be done via the web direct to SkyBox. Yes, that is 100% our preferred way of doing it, Rob. It will not require to be on site with an SD card. It is an option to be on site with a USB stick or USB cable, thumb drive, that sort of thing. But that's optional. Our preferred way of doing firmware updates is over the web, over the wire direct. Peter asked if SkyBox has a high frequency or a low frequency design. It's a high frequency design, and it does have fans in it. Andy asked, in an outage situation, what happens if you PV and a backup generator, if you have PV and a backup generator but no battery? Well, in an outage situation, you would either kick on the backup generator automatically, or whenever loads reached a certain threshold, or whenever, well, you have no battery. So yes, you would kick on the battery whenever loads reached a certain threshold. And you would continue to attempt to operate PV and battery, or PV and generator, excuse me, for as long as you could. Richard asked if we have a quick start guide for SkyBox. Yes, it is on the website. I believe that the website is outbackpower.com/SkyBox. Don't quote me on that. But if you do a search there, you should be able to see the quick start guide pretty quickly. Chris asks if there's a minimum amp hour battery required for SkyBox. And Chris, the answer is no. There is no minimum amp hour battery requirement for SkyBox. SkyBox, unlike a lot of other battery-based inverters, does not require that you operate it with a battery. So if you have 0 batteries, then you have 0 amp hours. So the way I like to answer the question, Chris, about minimum amp hour is to say that there is no such thing, and that it's actually just 48 volts. And that's the only way to think about it, is if you have a 48 volt battery of any size, you can connect that to SkyBox and get SkyBox starting again, running off of that battery. Now, it's not going to work well, but it will work. Rob asks what the generator control looks like. Is it a 2-wire start set of contacts like the Radian? Yes, it absolutely is. And Mario, I'm seeing now that you've asked the same sort of question that Chris did. You guys have all arrived at and thought of a very similar and very useful, if not elegant, solution, which is, yes, on the second day after a power outage, the 48 volt battery is required in order to reactivate the SkyBox and reclose the PV relay. You don't need a very big or a very pretty battery in order to make that happen. You just need 48 volts. And then Glenn asked, is SkyBox okay and working in Puerto Rico? Yes, sí, senor, it absolutely is. SkyBox gives you the ability to change your interconnection profile requirements. So if you are connecting in and doing a PREPA form, you can make the ride-through changes there that are appropriate for PREPA, and SkyBox will absolutely work and work well for you in Puerto Rico. And with that, it looks like we're about exactly on time. Oh, we got one more late breaking question. Glenn, I'll follow up with you on Sunspec and Tigo F. And Dale, I don't know how to best answer your question about SkyBox and having a Skynet Terminator-esque naming reference. It was named prior to me getting here, and I think the SkyBox name is pretty cool, but I don't know the origins of it. And Jeremy, I'll follow up with you on the flooded lead acid question. 60 volts is absolutely too low to do an equalization charge. So it will work with a SkyBox will work with a flooded lead acid battery up to 60 volts, and then it just would not be able to equalize. You would have to do the equalization with a different inverter that had a wider voltage range. Glenn, you're asking to confirm that the Tigo S, the firefighter rapid safety version of the Tigo, does not cause the nuisance arc fault trips. That is 100% correct. The Tigo S does not cause nuisance arc fault trips within SkyBox. Tigo's testing seemed to indicate that and again, this was a few months ago, that the Tigo O would do that. But it's something that I'm strongly motivated to follow up with them on and to see if that's still the case. I'm hoping that it's not. But you know, it is sort of what it is. Okay, I'm seeing one last question, and then I'm gonna cut things off for now and remind you that we'll do another session more focused on applications and uses for SkyBox next week at the same time. And this last question is from Alex. Is my 48-volt battery bank is calculated for 2 hours of autonomy? Will I get more from it using SkyBox? And my best way of answering that is saying maybe today, but certainly in the future. When we support the advanced load management functions, we will have the ability to, hopefully I didn't just lose audio, we'll have the ability to increase days of autonomy by managing which loads are powered by SkyBox, be those 240-volt loads or just loads that are online or leg one. So with that, thank you again. And I'll see if I can get. Okay, well, thank you for your time, and remind you that we'll be back again to target applications and uses on November 1st at 10 a.m. Pacific time. Thank you kindly.